Life Audio.
I needed someone to see past my fears and speak truth to me, because I could not speak truth to myself in that moment.
Welcome to the Faith Over Fear podcast, where we discuss powerful truths to quiet anxiety and fear, big and small. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how listeners can address whether they're trying to fit in or whether they can rest in where they already fit. We can start a journey toward becoming who God says we are, rather than striving to be someone we're not. Join us after we hear these brief messages from our sponsors.
For some of us, personal finances aren't just personal. They include loved ones, neighbors, the communities we call home, and the causes we hold in our hearts. At Thrivent, planning your finances is bigger than just money. We help you put your plans into motion and faith into action so you can do more for the ones in your heart. Because sometimes all you need to make a difference is someone to help you make it happen. Thrivent, where money means more. Connect with us at Thrivent.com.
Have you ever wondered, is the Bible true? For 3 millennia, seekers of all kinds have asked this timeless question. Now best-selling author, entrepreneur, and philanthropist Mark Gerson offers a unique answer through social science. In his groundbreaking new book, Gerson reveals the 21st century social scientists are asking the same questions that the Bible has been answering for centuries. And his conclusion? The Bible is true. Absolutely, comprehensively, and enthusiastically true. Through this monumental work, Gerson connects biblical wisdom with practical modern issues, covering topics like how to choose a spouse, building a happy marriage, raising confident children, overcoming adversity and fear, succeeding in business, and much more. And the best part? All author proceeds benefit African Mission Healthcare, a nonprofit Mark co-founded, bringing life-saving care to millions through Christian missionary physicians in Africa. Order your copy today at www.godwasright.com.
I'm Carol McCracken, and today's guest is Dr. Sandra Dalton-Smith. She's an internal medicine physician, international speaker, and coach dedicated to restoring mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. She's also the award-winning author of Set Free to Live Free and Sacred Rest, and the host of the I Choose My Best Life podcast. Dr. Sandra lives in Alabama with her husband and their 2 sons. And today we're going to be discussing her latest release, Being Fully Known. Welcome, Dr. Sandra. We're so glad you're here.
It's my pleasure to join you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to start off with Being Fully Known. It sounds incredibly vulnerable to me, possibly terrifying. What do you think scares people most about truly being seen, and how does your book help them push past that?
I think we fight back against it because our culture really does not breed us to be able to do that. You know, right now our culture, especially with the way social media is, relationships tend to be a lot more superficial.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at the surface, we're looking at the good. We don't spend a lot of time in those type settings going deep with people. And the research, this is long before COVID, but COVID made it worse. People had fewer adult friends now than ever.
Mm.
Everyone's focused on their own lives, their own families, their own careers. There are not as many opportunities to be around people unless you're really intentional about it. And so I fear that we have become people who have become so familiar with not being known that we start fearing being known to the point that we withdraw, and we're never getting to the place where we can fully be who God has called us to be and fully be authentic in how God has created us. And that's really what the book's about. It's a book to help you kind of rediscover, who are you? What do you like? What do you not like? What are some passions and some gifts and talents that you stopped really investigating and even looking at because you don't use them in your day job, or people haven't affirmed them, or you're not getting that of girls, for that particular thing that you do. But there are some areas of ourselves that we have not cultivated, but it doesn't mean God doesn't want to cultivate it. And so I want people to have that question in the back of their mind as they're going through the book.
Sure. Well, you say that being known is a basic human need. Why Just so many of us ignore that. And you point out that there's a cost to us emotionally and spiritually. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We definitely have a need to feel accepted and loved and appreciated outside of the things we do, outside of the metrics that we meet or the checks boxes and expectations of others. And so that's part of the heart need that we have,
Mhm.
is that we want to realize that if I do nothing, I'm still accepted. We
Oh.
receive that with God, but there's also people and places and situations in our lives where who we are is enough.
Mm.
But we're not going to find those places unless we have a level of vulnerability and we have a level of searching for it. And so that's that other component of it. The book I talk about beholding, becoming, and belonging. A huge part of us are trying to meet that need by fitting in. We're trying to figure out how to make ourselves kind of fit into the scenery and the crowd that we are a part of. And that tends to just add more stress because true places of belonging, you fit if you do nothing. You fit simply because you complete what's needed in that space, just your presence, your personality, the things that you naturally bring without having to put forth a lot of extra effort are already present in the places where you truly belong.
Okay, that all sounds good, but I think that's hard-won knowledge from you because I was reading in the beginning of the book, and while I think I identified with it so much, you talked about how you were used to, I guess you were brought up, correct me if I'm wrong, in performance, and you didn't know how to not just be. Is that
Oh, absolutely. This isn't, I would say, this revelation that just came. This is 50 something years of trial and error with God and really learning that you can have a level of accomplishment outside of being known
Mm,
that will never satisfy you.
mm,
And I find a lot of people have experienced that. They have checked off boxes, they have goals that they wanted to meet, they had things that they said, well, and they felt in their heart, when this happens, I'll be happy. When I get this thing, when God answers this prayer, that's going to be the thing that fulfills me, satisfies me, meets that innermost need really to be known, but that innermost need of acceptance and love. And it doesn't happen.
mm.
And so when you get to that place, usually that's when people start having transitions in their life. They start questioning things like, is this the right job? Is this the right path that I'm going down? Is there more? You've heard a lot of people say, is there more? God is calling you to more. More of what
Right.
exactly? Because it's usually not more stuff or more goals. It's more of an understanding and self-awareness of who you are.
And who he created us to be. I love that. Well, all right then. So let's talk identity. What's the difference between being known for what you do and being known for who you are?
Because what you do can change. If you look in the Bible, there's never a time that I can recall where someone in the Bible, they started off with one thing they did and they ended up doing the exact same thing at the end of their life.
Huh.
God is constantly moving us through seasons. And so shepherds become kings. You have orphans become queen. You have
Yeah.
carpenters become messiahs. We have these paradigms where people are constantly evolving and becoming more known. And it's not as if they have to fight to become this. These things are already a part of who they are, but they do have to grow into it.
Mhm.
And so we spend a lot of energy trying to find the place that is going to feel comfortable, the
Mhm.
box that we can stay in for the rest of our life. We do it with kids. They come
Right.
out of high school. We say, hey, go to college, pick one thing that you're going to love and you're going to do for the rest of your
Yeah.
life. And that doesn't fit most of our paradigms. You get to a certain place where you're like, I feel like the cloud is lifted. The season has changed. I'm not supposed to be doing this still. And we fight that because our mentality is that it's more stable to have a known, even if the known is not the current thing where God is moving.
That's a good point. So, okay, then how do we shift into that when the world really it celebrates, I think you called it hustle and highlight reels.
Yeah, we have to decide whose satisfaction are we going for? Do
Ooh,
are we more concerned about the world being satisfied with what our life looks like, or do we actually want to live a life that feels like a John 10:10 life? You can have, and we see this all the time with people, who are like stars or people like that who are well known. And there's some situations where we see people take their life and you're like, they just had a bestseller movie. They were at the top of their game. Why did that happen? Because worldly success, the outside external type of success isn't soul satisfying. You can have a soul that is on the decline as you see your external on the incline and being promoted and celebrated. And so there's a separation of really, I consider it a holy boldness that you have to develop, where you are willing to choose your best life. It's the name of my podcast and my ministry.
Yeah.
God says before each of us, life or death, blessings or cursings, we get a choice. And really that choice is the one gift we get to give.
Yeah.
And if we think about I talk about in the book about my favorite Christmas song, The Little Drummer Boy, and you think about the gifts that we bring God, even our talents already belong to him. It's like there is nothing that we have really that is ours other than our will and our ability to say, I'm going to sacrifice, surrender, however you want to say it, this for something else. And I feel like that's the gift that we have that is hardest for most of us to do, simply because it feels too vulnerable. But if we can't trust God, who are we going to trust? So that's the first place of vulnerability that we have to really learn and practice. It doesn't happen overnight. God gives us each moments to say yes. There's small yeses, and those small yeses become larger yeses, and that trust grows in the process.
I love it. That's a good. Okay, so you talk about creating then these safe emotional spaces. Can you walk us through a moment maybe where somebody didn't fix you but fully saw you so that we can learn how to practice this?
Yeah, I would probably say one of the moments that comes to mind, I won't say her name. She's a well-known, well, she was a very well-known speaker. But one of my very first speaking engagements, I had never been on a stage. I talk about, if I'd known when I wrote my very first book back in 2008 that I had to do any kind of speaking, I would never have written any books ever, because that's just not what I want to do. It's not something I've ever had a desire for. And I remember my publisher actually set up my very first speaking engagement. That can tell you how long ago this was. And I flew out to the place and, got to the site and all the things. And what I didn't realize is that it was like 800 women that were going to be in this event. So the first thing I didn't know is that I had to go in front of all 800 and explain what I was going to be talking about in my breakout session. They were like, oh, it's a breakout. It's no big deal. And I'm thinking, oh, 20 people will show up. Well, it was 6 breakouts, 800 women. So it was going to be more than 20, more than likely. And so when I got to the room, I got through some way that initial stepping on stage. And the only way I realized that I got through it is when I got up there, I was shaking so incredibly hard. I mean, I know my voice was vibrating. I was so terrified. And I can say this person's name because I've talked about this many times. Her name is Lucinda Seacrest. And she came up behind, she was standing there. She was the MC. She put her hand on the small of my back. And it was as if she realized she needs my strength. She needs to know she may be speaking alone, but she is not alone in this moment. And she placed her hand on my back, and I some way fumbled through the words and said what I said. And I thought, nobody's coming to my breakout because I don't even know if that was logical. Well, I don't know what I said, but apparently it hit home because my session was overflowing with women. They literally had to turn women away. There was no space in the room. And when I saw the magnitude of the number of women coming in, they were sitting on the floor, they were up against the wall. I went into almost like a panic attack. And I've never had anything like that in my life. I ran out of the room before it started, went into the green room, and I was just like sitting there like, oh God, what am I going to do? Like they're there to hear me speak. And I hate speaking. And this other woman who was one of the keynote speakers, she was in there waiting for her turn to keynote after, the breakouts. She looked over at me and she goes, this doesn't go away, but he has equipped you. I didn't say a word to her.
Wow.
I didn't say anything to her. And she prayed for me. She says, now grab your stuff and go do what he says. And I was just like, who are you? Like, are you an angel? Like, it was one of those moments that literally changed my life because, and I left that room and I was like, the big name keynote speaker just told me this doesn't go away. She shared a little bit about how she always gets a little bit like that before every event. And I'm thinking, okay, if that's the case, then that doesn't mean that, then her seeing me and my weakness and
Right.
affirming me
Right.
let me know that I wasn't lesser than, because in the back of your head, when you feel unseen, you feel like I'm the weak link. I'm Papa's child who is just the weird one who doesn't know how to speak in front of people, who doesn't feel comfortable with this. He picked the wrong kid. He must have thought I was her or somebody else. But having a sister
Yeah.
come alongside me and say that and see something that I was even afraid to, I would never have said anything to her. Had I known she was in the green room, I would not have had the breakdown. I would have went to the bathroom or somewhere else because I would have been too ashamed. She bypassed my shame and saw me.
And really saw you and knew. I think that's why it's so important not to isolate. I've gotten myself in so much trouble being in my own head and isolating. And it's easy to get into that situation. In fact, you even talk about some warning signs. Even if we're surrounded by people, we can have emotional isolation. And to get to where you were, to be seen, what's the first thing somebody should do if they recognize that loneliness?
Well, I think you have to start with finding the person or people that you feel safe with.
Okay.
Like I said, I was in a situation on that particular day. I knew nobody in the entire building. I'm a girl from the South. We were up north in the like New England area. I mean, literally, I knew 0 people out of that 800 in that building.
Yeah.
What I now realize is I should have that night. I didn't tell you this, but that night before even going to the event, I literally cried all night long. I
Mhm.
pulled myself. I was like, God, why do you have me here? This is so horrible. I pulled myself together, iced my eyes down like the hours or so before I hopped on, before I got in the car to go with them. And so it was one of those things where that night I should have called someone. I
Mhm.
should have got on the, Zoom or something with or FaceTime or something with a friend and had a conversation
Yeah.
because I needed someone to see past my fears and speak truth to me because I could not speak truth to myself in that moment.
It was a scary moment. You couldn't see reality for sure.
For some of us, personal finances aren't just personal. They include loved ones, neighbors, the communities we call home, and the causes we hold in our hearts. At Thrivent, planning your finances is bigger than just money. We help you put your plans into motion and faith into action so you can do more for the ones in your heart. Because sometimes all you need to make a difference is someone to help you make it happen. Thrivent, where money means more. Connect with us at Thrivent.com.
Have you ever wondered, is the Bible true? For 3 millennia, seekers of all kinds have asked this timeless question. Now best-selling author, entrepreneur, and philanthropist Mark Gerson offers a unique answer through social science. In his groundbreaking new book, Gerson reveals the 21st century social scientists are asking the same questions that the Bible has been answering for centuries. And his conclusion? The Bible is true. Absolutely, comprehensively, and enthusiastically true. Through this monumental work, Gerson connects biblical wisdom with practical modern issues covering topics like how to choose a spouse, building a happy marriage, raising confident children, overcoming adversity and fear, succeeding in business, and much more. And the best part? All author proceeds benefit African Mission Healthcare, a nonprofit Mark co-founded, bringing life-saving care to millions through Christian missionary physicians in Africa. Order your copy today at www.godwasright.com.
When we start feeling like we're over our head, when we start feeling like we're in this by ourselves, it's always a lie.
Mm.
You're never alone. You're never alone. Even if you don't feel like you have a friend you can call, you're never alone because God says he will never leave us or forsake us. So if you feel alone, then a part of that is because some way you have gotten kind of disconnected, so to speak, from the vine in your logic and your reasoning and your belief. And in that moment, I felt like, well, God can do all these other things. He's opened all these other doors, but he can't actually strengthen my insecurity.
Mm.
It's like he can do all this stuff, but he can't deal with my emotional stuff that has me feeling insecure, which is not true.
Exactly. It's a lie. That's good. One tool you talk about, I'm all about these practical things you outline in your book. I really want to highlight those. One tool you share, it's called, I couldn't think of the name of it, and here it is. It's about managing emotional fatigue. Can you explain how being known connects with emotional rest and how we can create the kind of rest in our daily lives so maybe it's not so easy to get to that point that we just described?
Yeah. So emotional rest is a term that comes from the 7 types of rest from my book, Sacred Rest. And really, in being fully known, the beholding deals going deeper into spiritual rest, becoming goes deeper into the emotional rest, and then belonging goes deeper into spiritual rest concepts. And so with emotional rest, the book really is built around an emotional rest journey because, each chapter we have those unveiling questions to help people go deeper into some of the psychology and the thought processes and some of the scriptural beliefs and things that are needed actually to have a healthier emotional set. So, one of the things I recommend for a lot of people is to first begin to identify, do you have a lot of emotional labor in your and emotional fatigue attached to the work that you do? Certain careers, certain life situations, if you're a caregiver, if you're a parent, if you work in any kind of healthcare or counseling or any of those kind of things, you are using, or even customer service, really, you're using quite a bit of emotional energy. And if you don't have a way to express those emotions in a healthy processing a way, you're going to lead into emotional labor, emotional fatigue.
Hmm.
Emotional labor happens when you have to suppress what you really feel
Yeah.
for the sake of staying professional. So somebody yells at you and you're in customer service, you don't get to yell back. You suck it up, you hold the emotions in. That's emotional labor. Well, a lot of us do that in other settings as well. Like I said, a caregiver, you might see something very sad or depressing related to the person you're caring for or serving, but you're not going to burst into tears because that doesn't really serve that person.
Sure.
So we have to recognize those types of situations and realize that even if you don't process an emotion in the moment, it needs a place to be able to be processed.
Mm.
So that could be done in a journal. It could be done, with a trusted friend. Maybe you have a friend you get with once a month or once a week, and you have coffee and you just talk about kind of your life and what's happening in your life and what places where you need prayer and support. That could be part of emotional rest. It could be done through some type of creative expression. Some people can't verbalize what they're feeling, but they can express it in a different way. Like my son likes to play his guitar. So depending on what kind of music he's playing, the type of song he's playing, I kind of can tell what kind of emotions he's processing through. So and some people draw, some people write poetry. So there's lots of ways to process emotion, but it needs to be processed because otherwise it gets added to your emotional backpack. And that's when you start feeling the effects of emotional labor and emotional fatigue.
And keep carrying it if you can't. All
Mm-hmm.
right. So let's say somebody's listening right now and they think, no, thanks. I don't want to be known. That's messy. That's painful. What would you say to gently challenge what they're thinking, that resistance?
Yeah, I would ask them. Well, the first question I always ask when someone has that kind of pushback is, are you satisfied?
Hmm.
Do you truly feel a sense of satisfaction in your life? Because if you do, keep doing what you're doing. If you feel like your life is full and satisfying, because what I know to be true is this goes in processes and phases.
Okay.
So there's phases of being known. You can get to a place where you're like, okay, I'm good. I feel like I'm good with God. I'm good with myself. I'm good with other people. And then the season will change. Every person will enter a season where the level of depth of their relationship with God goes deep enough that it's going to require them to go into a level of beholding at another level.
Ah.
So it's similar to when you first get saved, everything is so beautiful and Jesus is so lovely, and all the birds are singing, and it's like, it's a honeymoon period, so to speak, where everything is just so fantastic. And then there's levels of maturity with that where you go deeper in your understanding of who he is and how he can use you and what he's doing on the earth. You start developing the Father's heart towards things and people.
Mhm.
And the more that part of yourself gets developed, it only comes by beholding him.
Mm.
How do you know someone unless you spend time with them?
Good point.
And so the more you spend time with God, the more you start feeling what he feels and seeing what he sees and recognizing the level of pain and disparity on the earth and the level of hope that's needed that oftentimes is not in certain places and situations where you may have a unique opportunity because of your gifts, your talents, your background, your whatever
Yeah.
to fit in a specific way. That's true belonging. And I find that usually somewhere between the ages of 40 and 60,
Mm.
most people get to that place.
Ah.
But if the person who's listening is a 20-year-old and they're in the honeymoon phase with God, where he is kind of, Holy Spirit is giving them a chance to build trust and relationship, and they haven't gone into kind of the deep unto deep, the deeper well of who he is and how he can use them. Some people get there quick. Most people take between 40 to 60 is what I'm noticing, and they hit that place where they're like, God, I know you have something more. Show me what the more is, and I'm willing to give you my surrendered yes.
Well, you've said that being known doesn't mean being exposed, because to me, being exposed is very scary. What's the difference, and how does our understanding that, how does it show up in our faith and in our friendships?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be exposed. I think when we think about being exposed, it's like the fig leaves are gone. You're like,
Yeah.
I'm showing everybody all my parts. So, so no, it doesn't have to be like that, because being fully known is you still have with your will. Your will never gets completely, never gets taken from you, so to speak. So you still have your will as far as how much you reveal in different situations. But with being fully known, it's being fully known is the beholding part, knowing God more clearly.
Mhm.
The becoming part, becoming more aware of who he is in you, and then stepping into the places where you uniquely fit.
Mm.
So that process doesn't require you to expose any more than you need to in any given place where he's calling you to fit. For example, if I'm going into a situation where I feel like he's calling me into a certain community to love on people or share about something or whatever,
Mhm.
when I go into that situation, it's usually specifically related to my relationship and my heart towards the people in that situation.
Okay.
Maybe I grew up in an abusive home or something, or maybe I had the illness that they had, or whatever it is. There's something specific that is making me uniquely able to share in that situation. I don't have to give the details of my life to serve with a heart that understands.
I love that.
And I think that's the difference. We think, oh, well, if God calls me into, I don't know, like sexual abuse, some kind of sexual abuse, something where I'm going to serve people in that area because I've experienced that. You don't ever have to give your testimony, but you will show up in that place with a level of belonging that someone like myself, who's never experienced that,
Right.
won't know how to maneuver. I might have empathy, and I might be like, oh, I can't even say I understand because I don't.
Right.
But and I think that's the confusion we have is that, oh, if God calls me to that, I'm going to be exposed. No, you're going to be his hands and feet in that situation, and he's already made the sacrifice. You just have to give a yes.
That seems a little less scary. Where do you see fear mostly blocking people from being known? And I'm going into like fear of rejection, fear of judgment, or fear of being disappointed. And how can faith speak into that?
Yeah, fear is a huge issue. There's so many fears that that's the number one thing that's blocking most people.
Yeah.
Fear and limiting beliefs, I would probably say, are the main two things that limit people. The top fear that I'm seeing over and over again has to do with fear of what will other people say. I can't tell you how many times
Yeah.
I've heard people say things like, well, what will people say if they saw me trying this or doing this or changing to this, or all of a sudden I'm going to show up and, with this new way of serving and being. But, I think for the most part, when we start being more concerned with what people will say, is usually because there's some aspect of us that is getting a reward from their affirmation. It's like something about us needs their approval,
Mhm.
even if we already have God's approval. It's like we need that extra, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And so it's an opportunity to really evaluate where you find value and what makes you feel secure, what makes you feel accepted, what makes you what really makes you feel as if you are on target with what God's doing. Is it metric related? Is it related to people, their words, how many people signed up for your event, or how many whatever was sold or purchased? And I challenge people oftentimes, can we shift what we celebrate from the metrics, the number of copies sold, the number of courses, the number of speaking engagements, all those things that we can sometimes use to determine if we're on track with God, to actually celebrating if we were obedient to give a yes when we felt called to something.
That's entirely different, isn't it?
Because if we switch our mindset to that, you don't have to have an outcome that meets your expectation.
Mm.
Your yes is the celebration.
That's it.
I find that usually when people get their specific metrics they want to see, they set themselves up for disappointment, which then feeds their own fears and doubts.
Ooh,
And so it's like, oh, I thought God, I coach a lot of women who write.
right.
And so, oh, I thought God told me to write this book, and I had visions of it being a bestseller, and I had visions of a bazillion copies sold or whatever it is. But did God say all of that? Or was that just your hopeful expectation? You felt a conviction that God called you to write. Maybe the celebration should be that you wrote.
Wow. That's framing it completely different. You said yes, you were obedient.
And the outcome is his. So there's so much freedom in that.
Mm.
There's literally a weight that comes off of you when you start looking at your belonging moments, the
Mhm.
places where he calls you into a way of belonging, where you are serving, you're allowing who you've become through beholding him to now fit into unique spaces within the world. It takes the limits off of it, because you're not going to judge it good, bad, worthy, or not worthy by metrics that are not heaven's.
Mm.
It says Jesus left the 99 to go after the one. Well, he
Amen.
wouldn't have done that if he was looking at Instagram metrics, right? He would have been
That's
like, that's not effective. Let's stick with the 99.
that's true.
So we have to change kind of how we're viewing things, because it's really more about our heart positioning.
I like that. There's one chapter I've been waiting to ask this. One my favorite chapter, maybe because of where I am in life, becoming unshakable. That really resonated with me. And you heard some words. You heard the words God sees, God promotes. Can you talk a little bit to our listeners about what you call a set apart season?
Yeah, I think it's the season nobody wants to go into, is what it is. The set, just being honest, it's the season nobody
Amen.
wants, but it's the season that all who are going to be used in a greater measure have to go through.
Oh,
We just recently, my family watched the House of David series,
mm.
and well, I don't want to give it away for anybody who hasn't watched. It's about the Book of David, so it's not like I can really give it away. We all know what happens. But if you just look at David in the Bible,
Mhm.
if we just look at it there, Samuel anointed him, and there was this long stretch of time
Yeah,
before he was ever like crowned king.
right.
And we look at Joseph. He has the dream,
Yes.
long stretch of time before he's ever promoted.
Right.
And I find that a lot of us, when we feel like God has like spoken something to our heart, like given us an idea or some inclination of like what he's doing and where he's leading, we are so gung ho on, I saw it, I believe it, I'm ready, God, put me in, coach, kind of kind of mentality. And we don't realize that we don't have the character, we don't have the spiritual muscle, we don't have the emotional muscle, we don't have anything we need to even partner with Holy Spirit. Because we're not going to try to do it in our own strength and our own flesh,
Right.
but our own strength and our own flesh has to know how to partner with Holy Spirit.
Mm.
And that's training ground that requires a set apart season. You don't learn that in the busy of life. You don't learn that in the spotlight. You learn that on the backside of the mountain. You learn that in the secret place. You
Yeah.
learn that during the times of deep abiding where it looks like zero zilch is happening, but the roots are going so deep and they're getting so nourished that what sprouts forth can't be knocked over with a simple breeze.
Ugh.
And I try to encourage people who are in that place because God has so much he's trying to accomplish on the earth, and he does it through his kids. He
Yeah.
does it through you and me. He does it through us. And so he's priming us to be able to do the work, and we have to allow ourselves the training ground
Mm.
and not view it as, why do you have me waiting, God? What, how many prayers or fast or whatever do I need to do to hurry you up to get
Right.
this thing moving so we can get on with it, and actually appreciate the fact that he cares enough to prime us
Mm.
for the promotion.
That's it. He's equipping us so we'll be successful and not fail. I think if we could see it with that lens, it might help just a little bit in the waiting. Though I must confess, poor David, he had to be in a cave.
Yeah, his set apart season was,
Oh,
yeah.
man.
Well, and Joseph wasn't much better. I mean, but
Jail, good point.
I find it really interesting because, and I love both of those stories because they didn't do anything wrong to be set apart,
That's
to
it.
to have that season of pause and pull back.
Amen.
You know what I mean? We watch and we see things like David, at the cave. Saul literally is trying to kill him.
Right.
And he's like, I will not touch the Lord's anointed. It's like, you got to finish this thing off and been on with it. But he's like, I'm not going to, he chose to stay in the set apart season. It's like, I'm not going to do anything to rush this along. And I wonder how many of us could do that,
Oh, man.
to say, you know what, God, I realize you're doing something in me. It's not just the stuff you're doing around me. You're doing something in me. And I'm willing to endure this because I can tell it's working for a greater glory.
Talk about a lens that might make us be a little bit more patient if we realize, because I must confess, many times I'm like, all right, God, I hate waiting. I hate waiting. But what if he let us go and we weren't ready for the job that he had us do? What great love that he wants us equipped so that we do it where we belong, just as you say. The gifts that he gave us are ready. So I love that chapter for anyone. If you buy the book, that's for me the best chapter ever, because Dr. Sandra's right. Nobody wants to go into that season, but it's so necessary if you're obedient in that season.
It is. And that's the beauty of whenever the time comes, because none of us know when it's going to happen.
Right.
So, but whenever the time comes, that's the beauty of it. It's such a surprise when you exit the season.
Yeah.
It's not one of those things where you get to orchestrate it.
Mm.
You can only rest into it. You get to a place where you're just resting in the set apart season. And you're just like, okay, God, when you're ready, I'm ready. But
Well,
I'm gonna wait on you.
Well, I love that because you said earlier in your book, you said, I can only rest at the level of my trust in God.
Mhm.
So you've got to fully trust him or you really can't rest.
I found in my own journey, I have so many people who ask me, well, how do you do this? And how did you do that? And how did you get this? And how did you get that? And I'm like, I have no earthly idea. I have literally no earthly idea. And I have to honestly say, I stopped trying to tell God when,
Mm.
and I stopped trying to figure out how. And I simply got to a place where I'm like, here I am.
What freedom.
And I talk about in the book a word, hineni, which has been translated. Most of the Bible is translated, so it's not the language it initially started with, but or all of the Bible has. So hineni has been translated to be, here I am. It's kind of what Abraham said when God called him to take Isaac up. He goes, here I am. Moses, here I am. So I got to that here I am place. And what I didn't realize until I was at a speaking engagement and they were teaching on this word, and I'd never heard of it before. And she explained that the true Hebrew meaning of it is not simply here I am. It's an actual conversation with God that says, my answer. So God says, your name, Carol, and you say Hineni. And it's not here I am because he knows where you're at.
Right.
It's God, my answer's yes. Just tell me the question.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, I didn't realize that was what was happening. But in that set apart season, that's what he was getting my heart to. The level of trust where I don't really even need to know any details. I'm not going to ask you the details, God. If I feel like you're saying that this is something I'm supposed to step into, yes. You called me, I'm like, yes. Just point me in the direction of it. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know any of the details, but my answer is yes before you even ask the full question.
I have goosebumps all over me now. To be to that point where you fully trust him, because what harm is he going to do to us? He wants our good. And you are resting in that. That's very clear just looking at you. May we all be in that same place. And thank you for drawing our attention to that. So if listeners could take one brave step after hearing our conversation today, what do you hope it would be?
I would say just start beholding him again. Our lives are busy. There's so much stuff we have going on. Every one of us, if look at our calendars, probably has way more things packed in it than it needs to be there. I just say start each day looking for God in the ordinary. Where are the places you're seeing his goodness, the places you're seeing his love, the places where you're recognizing he's allowing beauty to be before you, that you're probably just stepping by and not really thinking about. And just start with beholding him, because the more we start seeing God in and around all things, the more we start noticing who he is inside of us as well.
That's beautiful. Very encouraging too. So for all of those people that want to get a copy of your wonderful book, where can they find it?
Yeah, the book is in all the places. I always love for you to visit your local Christian bookstores if you have one, because we need real bookstores where you can go in and flip through copies. But it's all the places, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. I do want to let them know we also have a summer book club that's going to be available June through the middle of July. And they can just go to beingfullyknown.com. It's free. We have leader guides if you're going to lead a group through it. We have all kind of resources, videos, and all things that you automatically will have access to just by joining.
Excellent. I'm in. Definitely. And thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. We hope you were inspired by Dr. Sandra's message and that you feel empowered with some tools to enjoy the freedom to be yourself by bridging the disconnect between your roles and your true self and living into what God sees in you. If you haven't already done so, I encourage you to subscribe to this podcast so you won't miss a single episode. Rate it because it encourages Jennifer and me. Share it with your friends. And until next time, may you live as one who has been set free.
Looking for ways to stay positive? Brighten your day with the Free Story Behind podcast. Hear weekly short stories that showcase true joy, love, and hope. Listen now at lifeaudio.com or by searching for Story Behind wherever you get your podcasts.